Hello, I'm Police Commissioner William Dwyer. Welcome to another season of Police Journal. This program will give you an inside look at the Warren Police Department and highlight other issues that impact our community. I always welcome your comments and suggestions. Please feel free to email me at wdwyer@warrenpd.org. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hello, my special guest today is the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, Barbara McQuade. Barbara, welcome to Police Journal.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I know there's a lot we're going to talk about today as far as what you've done so far as the U.S. Attorney, maybe bring people up to date as far as what's happening in Detroit as far as violent crime and what we're doing as far as the corruption cases in Detroit. But let's start first with a little bit of your professional background, if you'd share that with our audience.
Sure. Well, I became U.S. Attorney just this year in January, but before that I was an assistant U.S. Attorney in the office in Detroit for 12 years, doing a variety of kinds of prosecution from violent crime cases to terrorism cases. Before that, I was at a private law firm for 5 years and clerked for a federal judge right out of law school.
Oh, very good. And I understand you're local here as far as Macomb County. You went to high school in Sterling Heights?
Grew up in Sterling Heights, lived there from the age of 3 to about 18, and played softball at Liberty Park down the street here, and lost a lot of softball games to Warren Cousino.
Very good, very good. Well, Barbara, let me ask you this. You've been the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District now for how long?
Since January, so about 6 months.
6 months, and you're actually the first female U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District.
Yes, that's right.
That's great. Let's start with, first of all, some of your priorities as far as being the new U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District.
Yeah, one of the great things about being a U.S. Attorney is the Department of Justice really allows you to kind of identify your own priorities, what matters most in your district, right here locally. And, you know, for me, the biggest priorities that we want to focus our attorney resources on are terrorism, public corruption, violent crime, financial fraud, and civil rights. And of course, we need to be multifaceted. We do a lot of things even beyond that, but those are the areas that we're focusing our attention on because those, to me, seem to be the most pressing needs in our community right now.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think really the general public knows really how important the U.S. Attorney's Office is and the volume of cases you handle and the staff that you have in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Maybe you could share with us the staffing levels in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Sure. We have about 110 lawyers in the Eastern District of Michigan. Most of them are in Detroit, though we have some in Flint and some in Bay City. We've got about another 100 staff members who do everything from paralegal work to financial analysis to courtroom technology. So a little over 200 total, but we do cases beyond those that I described. In addition to prosecuting criminal cases in court, we also defend the federal government anytime they're named as a defendant in a lawsuit. So medical malpractice cases, slip and fall accidents occurring on federal property, a variety of civil matters as well.
That's interesting. If you were to break down the U.S. Attorney's Office as far as divisions, you have a number of deputy U.S. attorneys that are in charge of different divisions, is that correct?
We do. We break down into a criminal and a civil and an appellate division. We also have an administrative division that oversees all of our administrative matters. And then within each of those divisions, we also have some subcomponents, some units. And so some of those priority areas I talked about are the areas where we have individual units taking care of the cases that fall under those subject matters.
Okay. What are some of the changes that you have made so far? I know that there was some concern over the U.S. Attorney's Office going back a year or so ago, and I know that actually when we had the panel as far as the selection for U.S. Attorney, there was a lot of concern about the new U.S. Attorney coming in and making the changes that were necessary, and I know you've been very aggressive and progressive as far as making changes.
Yeah, well, when we came in, one of the things I wanted to do is to restructure the office, and we've done that now. It was an enormous undertaking. The structure of the office had not been changed since it was developed in the 1970s, when there were 35 assistant U.S. attorneys. Today we have 110, and some very different purposes that we need to accomplish. You know, terrorism certainly was not an issue in the 1970s, or cybercrime and some of those kinds of things. So we've restructured the office for the purpose of aligning our attorneys with the priorities, and we've also created some smaller units of supervision, and the goal there is just to make sure our attorneys are being as responsive as they need to be to the needs of our citizens. So it's still a work in progress. We've got the people in new places, and we're transitioning, and I have been so impressed by the professionalism of our attorneys in embracing change, and the goodwill that they've shown to me in terms of embracing these new challenges.
That's great. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something that I think there was a summit just recently on violent crime. And I know you were on a panel. I know the chief from Detroit and the sheriff and a number of federal agencies sat on that panel. Can you discuss a little bit about that summit and also what the U.S. Attorney's Office is doing working on violent crime?
Yes, sure. The summit was a wonderful event. I think the summit came about because of concerns in the community about recent violence within the city of Detroit, from the killing of a police officer to the shooting and fatal killing of a 7-year-old girl, which was absolutely tragic. And so the idea was, let's bring the community together and talk about, you know, everyone is really just fed up. No one wants this kind of culture anymore. And so it was a very positive event. I think that some of us went in thinking that it could be a complaint session, but it was led by the NAACP. The Reverend Wendell Anthony did a marvelous job of channeling people's energy into positive directions and saying, I want you to talk about deliverables tonight.
Right.
What are we going to do to move forward and change this culture of violence? And it was a wonderful evening. And I think a complement to that had occurred earlier in the day when members of law enforcement, the heads of Detroit Police, Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy, the head of the FBI, Andy Arena, head of ATF, had come together in our office to talk about the enforcement side of combating violent crime. And I think we're all in agreement that reducing violent crime requires aggressive enforcement, prevention and intervention initiatives, and community trust, because we can't just go out and be a paramilitary organization. We need the public to trust us, to provide us the tips we need, to be the witnesses we need in cases so that we can succeed.
I think you hit the community trust is number one. I know there was some criticism recently over being too aggressive. The Detroit Police Department, I don't mean that to be a criticism, but it was out there, and I think the chief is trying to do a job there, and I think he's doing an excellent job. But I think that the first step you have to take is the public trust.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that if you're a member of the public, if you have just one encounter with the police that's negative, it will affect your viewpoint on the police. So one takeaway, I think, from that is the importance in training of officers, and that officers on the street level always deal with the public in a respectful manner.
Mm-hmm. So you did talk about additional training for Detroit police officers?
We did. One of the things we talked about in our meeting together was a training component for police officers and federal agents to make sure that when they're interacting with the public, they're doing it in a way that will foster community trust.
And do you think that, moving forward, you're going to have additional summits and try to get some positive reaction as far as you move forward?
I think so, but one of the things we talked about is we don't want to just sit around and talk. We want to actually take action. And so some of the things we talked about is getting out and meeting with the public in a non-adversarial setting. We need to have, cookouts, law enforcement day picnics, and law enforcement day meetings at recreation centers, so we can get one-on-one contact with the citizens and understand their concerns, and also let them see that we're human, and we can have a regular conversation about a lot of things, not just an adversarial one.